Any successful deceased organ donation system needs public support. In South Africa, we have the Organ Donor Foundation, a non-profit public benefit organization established in 1988 to address the critical shortage of organ and tissue donors in South Africa through awareness and education campaigns for the public and medical professionals. It also maintains our organ donor registry. Similar organizations exist across the world. You simply have to look up organ donor poster on Google to get an idea of the various campaigns to increase public awareness about organ donation. No matter how powerful or hard-hitting an education campaign is, it needs community buy-in and organ donor champions, leaders to translate into improved consent rates. This is particularly true for communities that have not traditionally supported organ donation. In the United Kingdom, the consent rate for deceased donation from ethnic minorities is approximately half that of the national average. This contributes to these groups waiting on average a year longer for a kidney transplant. Of 1,364 donors in 2015, only 68 were from ethnic minorities in the United Kingdom. There's been a major drive to address this and engage community leaders, but progress has been slow. The current family consent rate of 34% in 2015 is an improvement on 24% in 2011. In Israel, cultural and religious concerns still influence organ donation rates. The view that Judaism objects to the definition of brain death persists, despite widespread engagement and endorsement from religious leaders. The same is true in Muslim countries and in the Far East. In Israel, the Organ Transplant Act of 2008 put in place a novel point system to reward people willing to donate with an increased chance of receiving an organ if they should ever need it. People signed on to the organ donor registry for more than 3 years, or who consent for a deceased family member to donate, or have made an undirected living organ donation themselves, are given maximum priority points if they come to need a transplant in the future. Public surveys showed that this system was preferred to one based on financial incentives. In the United Kingdom, 9 out of 10 people support organ donation, and yet only 1 in 3 are registered as organ donors. In an attempt to address this difference, a large randomized control trial was conducted on over 1 million people to analyze what was the most effective slogan to get people to sign up to the organ donor registry when renewing their driver's license or vehicle registration. The study found that a slogan of reciprocity was the most effective method of convincing people to sign up. If you needed an organ transplant, would you have one? If so, please help others. This was more effective than the slogans, "You could save or transform up to 9 lives as an organ donor," or 3 people die every day because there are not enough organ donors. It was estimated that using this slogan would result in 96,000 additional people signing on to the organ donor registry each year as compared with the control group. This study makes me think back to every conversation I've ever had with a family about organ donation. Did I use the best possible words? When it comes to public awareness about organ donation, it may seem easier to simply enact legislation to support presumed consent. This is not an effective way to change public opinion. Attempts in Brazil to enact such legislation led to a backlash against organ donation. There is unfortunately still a lot of misinformation that exists about brain death and organ donation, and public awareness programs need to correct these myths and misperceptions. Let me give you 10 examples. Myth 1. I am too old to be an organ donor. This is incorrect. All ages will be considered for organ donation. Myth 2. If emergency room doctors know I am an organ donor, they won't work as hard to save my life as they would if I wasn't an organ donor. Wrong. Doctors will do everything they can to save a patient. Only when all treatment options are exhausted is organ donation ever considered. The treating clinical team is always completely separate from the transplant team. Myth 3. Organ donation will mutilate my body. The body is treated with respect throughout the organ donation process. Incisions are sutured, and it is not disfigured. An open casket funeral is possible. Myth 4. Patients have recovered after being correctly certified brain dead. This has never occurred. Myth 5. My religion is against organ donation. All major religions in the world support organ and tissue donation and consider it an act of charity. Myth 6. If I say yes to donation, they will take everything they can. Consent is required for each organ and tissue donated. Myth 7. Asking consent for organ donation will distress a grieving family. Asking consent at the appropriate time assists with the grieving process, and donation can offer solace to a grieving family. Myth 8. Rich and famous people go to the top of the transplant waiting list. This does not happen. Organs are allocated equally and fairly to recipients, without regard to gender, ethnicity, religion, or social or financial status. Myth 9. There are not enough organs, so they give HIV-positive organs to HIV-negative patients. HIV-positive organs are only allocated into HIV-positive recipients in countries which have approved this practice. Sensitive screening tests are used to prevent transmission of any diseases from a donor to a recipient. Myth 10. I'm not in the best of health. No one would want my organs. No one approaches death in the best of health. Patients with comorbidities and organ dysfunction should be assessed for possible organ and tissue donation. There are very few conditions that preclude organ and tissue donation. Modern media platforms can be an effective way to connect us with more information and people than ever before. We have organ donation organizations on Facebook, Twitter. We have online education resources. Public awareness campaigns will always be needed to improve knowledge about organ donation, honor donors and their families, and spread the positive message essential to creating a culture of donation across the world. If you needed an organ, would you accept one?